transgender woman's milk is just as good for babies as breast milk. That's according to a letter from the medical director at University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust.
The narcissism and self-focused that is surrounding this agenda from men who are demanding to be allowed to have a baby suck on their nipples. When we take up the issue of transgender activists trying to push an agenda on the rest of us, we try our best to recognize that ultimately the entire argument has to do with upending cultural and religious norms in Western civilization. There's an application of normalcy that has been part of what Western civilization has sort of embraced for millennia. And in a very short amount of time, all of it is getting twisted and upended. And we went from, the fight for same-sex marriage, where people were saying, well, listen, it's all about love, and love should win in the end. And we want to make sure that people can visit their loved ones in their same-sex relationship in the hospital when their partner is going through chemo. And right now they're not allowed to do that. Or apply their Social Security benefits to them when they die. And right now they can't do that because we don't recognize their unions. And instead of figuring out some sort of governmental policy that will allow those humane ideas to be promoted, instead, marriage had to be redefined. And we've gone in a very short time from, this is just about love and love should win, to boys identifying themselves as girls and changing their clothes in a teenage girls' locker room and competing in sports against them and taking opportunities away from them in collegiate sports and high school sports. We've gone from love should win and people should be able to visit themselves in the hospitals if they're in love with each other to your kindergartner should read a book about gender fluidity and about a prince falling in love with another prince and being in love and living happily ever after. And it's all against your rights as a parent for your child. It's all against all of these things are introduced to your children, not on your terms and not through the prism of your personal faith and morals and principles. No, because the government, through a public school or through your government institutions, they know better than you. And boy, it's been a real short trip, hasn't it? In just the last 15 years. And now we've reached a new frontier. Because transgender individuals are adopting babies or using surrogacy to have babies, and transgender women who are biological men who now present themselves, even though they are physically and in terms of body parts still male, they are presenting themselves as women and now demanding the right to breastfeed a baby with their brand new genetically altered breasts. Because remember, it's really just about love, and love needs to win. And these people need to be able to visit their loved one in the hospital if they're sick. All right, so let's take a look at the report out of London.
Now, transgender woman's milk is just as good for babies as breast milk. That's according to a letter from the medical director at University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust. The claim was made as part of a response against campaign groups. The trust referred to studies and the World Health Organization guidance, including one case which found what it called no observable effects in babies fed by induced lactation. Well, to discuss this in a bit more detail, I'm joined now by Kate Luxian, who is a research fellow in creative global health at the University College London and a lactation consultant trainee. I wanted to begin by getting your reaction to what we've heard from the hospital about this.
Of course, and it's actually not very new in terms of a concept or an idea. It's something, as someone who works in LGBT pregnancy and reproduction, that we've known for quite a while. There's studies back in the 90s that talk about the sameness of milk from the birth mother and then the co-lactating mother in terms of 10 days after birth. There's no difference seen there. And when we look at the research that's been done specifically about trans women, there's a case study that was done and published last year where they actually found that the nutritional value was either at or above the nutritional value of then the meta-analysis referent that it used. So using the example of kind of a larger sample of what we look for in breast milk, it was seen to be at least, if not higher quality.
There have been, of course, campaign groups who have criticised this letter. One policy exchange has said that the letter is unbalanced and naive in its assertion that the secretions produced by a male on hormones can nourish an infant in the way a mother's breast milk can. What is your take on that criticism?
Well, if we look at the evidence and what we can see from the science of it, the baseline of what would be in a trans mother's blood.
I mean, listen, she says trust the science. And when has science ever let us down on something like this, right? A little bit more to say about this and where this trend may lead and what I think might actually be behind a lot of it in just a moment. But here, this is actually kind of fascinating. Here's somebody who takes a different point of view over there in London on this decision.
I was looking at it objectively thinking, okay, so this is a scientific breakthrough. A bloke can basically lactate and produce milk. And then I thought, well, hang on. This is unnatural. It's almost turning into Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Almost science is almost turning into a movie. And the fact that they are giving people medical supplements. And the word there that was so pertinent was necessary. This is not necessary. There are plenty of off-the-shelf formulas that people can purchase. And the World Health Organization will quite understandably say breast is best. I get all of that. But we're talking about someone who is born a man. And for all intents and purposes, is a man. Now, yes, they can go through whatever gender reassignments. I get all of that and I respect them. That's their journey. But it is not necessary. And when you actually look at the chemicals that they are feeding into themselves, throwing down their gullet in order to lactate, and the possible, why are you making me smile? You
throwing down their gullet.
You really do. You really do. But this is the in a nutshell. And you know, it's not necessary.
Is it?
That's the thing. If it was necessary, it's a scientific breakthrough. Well, but I could go to Marks and Spencer's and buy some baby formula. I'm a bloke. I don't need to lactate.
That's right. And God bless GB News for that one. All right, listen, here's the bottom line here. And he makes a really important point. To develop breasts to the point where what a great conversation this is, isn't it? To develop breasts, for a man to develop breasts to the point where it is secreting a fluid that is becomes nourishment for a baby, the amount of estrogen that person would have to pump into their body to fool their body into thinking that they are a lactating woman is through the roof. And listen, I have been a dad to newborn babies. And I know what a new mother goes through to make sure that their body is in a pure state to nurse that baby. They're told they shouldn't smoke, they shouldn't drink, they should watch what they eat, because everything that they put into their body then comes out partially in that breast milk, right? I mean, that's just common sense. We know that for a fact. You go look at any book of advice for new mothers who are breastfeeding, and it tells you the kind of proper diet you should be on. And you should, suggests that you look out for the hormones that are in the foods that you're eating and drinking. You know, if you can get grass-fed organic beef and organic milk that doesn't have hormones that were shot into the cows. So they don't want you to have hormones in the food you're eating that have been shot into the cows and animals to produce that food. But it's okay if you overload your male body with estrogen to trick it into thinking that it's a lactating mother, and none of that's going to have an effect on the baby. Does that make any common sense? I know the science. Oh, I know the science. Just look at the science. Yeah, because when has science ever been infected by a political agenda? Right? But there's something else at play here, as I said. And I just want to explore it a little bit more. Because of this newest story, there's a year-old Reddit thread that has now gotten attention. And here's a posting of it. My wife is refusing to let me breastfeed our newborn. This is making me dysphoric and seems transphobic. I've been on estrogen for 2 years and transitioned after 6 years with my wife. She accepts and sees me as a woman. However, She gets very uncomfortable and cagey when I suggest sharing breastfeeding. I haven't had top surgery yet, but I read about inducing milk and how we can produce it. I feel like as a woman, I have the right to breastfeed our newborn, and excluding me from it is implying I'm not a real woman or mother. What should I say or do to make her see sense? Yeah, I've got some advice. So if you look at that message right there on Reddit, you look at the discussion that was had on GB News, and then you look at the discussion that was had with a scientist on BBC, and you see a common thread here, don't you? Nowhere in the conversation, nowhere in the science, nowhere in the articles about how a man's transgender lactating milk is just as good as a woman's. Nowhere in there is a question of what is in the best interest of the infant. What is in the best interest of the baby? This is the most selfish, narcissistic, egomaniacal agenda playing out before our eyes at an infant's expense. As I said, I was a newborn father of 4 little babies, and I witnessed firsthand the joy and wonder of the birth of these babies, and yes, the nursing of those babies, the development of those babies, and the diapers for that matter. I was a very much hands-on father. I was in charge of output. My children's mother was in charge of the input. So I did a lot of diapers. And I watched the process. And we had a very open relationship about the entire breastfeeding process. I studied it quite a bit. And I'm here to tell you, and you can read about this in whatever studies you want. You can go and look at whatever papers you want. This is an absolute fact. There is a hormonal stimulation that takes place when a baby is nursing from a mother. Now, sometimes it's very uncomfortable. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's not very pleasant at all. But other times, women experience sometimes a euphoric feeling when they're nursing a baby. And this makes sense, doesn't it? Because I don't think I'm breaking any ground here, and I don't think I'm surprising anyone to tell you that breasts, both male and female breasts, are incredibly sensitive parts of the body with nerve endings that are really, really reactive to stimulation. They could be ticklish, it can be painful, but it can also give somebody a pleasurable feeling, right? When their breasts and nipple area is stimulated. And forgive me for going out on a limb here, but the narcissism and self-focused that is surrounding this agenda from men who are demanding to be allowed to have a baby suck on their nipples only makes rational sense if you recognize that these self-centered, selfish individuals are getting some kind of kick out of this. You cannot say that it's great for the baby. You cannot say that it's necessary for the baby, because you know logically that in the case of this person on Reddit, there's a woman involved and she's got perfectly good breasts, so she can nurse the baby. Job done. And you know for a fact that you can get formula and you can feed a child on bottle food. Job is done. The only reason you're injecting yourself into this process and demanding that you participate in it is for your own selfish needs and desires. And when you add to that mix the fact that there is a physical, almost sensual gratification from this process, sorry, it lays out to me an obvious truth here, that this is just one more step towards the normalization of the most evil practices of sexual deviancy, framed within the rights of an individual because they have the right alphabet letter after their identity. And it's got to be stopped. And forgive me for explicitly calling it for what it is.